Welcome back to Switched On. This is Julien Verzier. I'll be your host today, and I'm delighted to have Gabriel Rechard with us, Sales Director of ELUM Energy in the Sub-Saharan region. And we're here to talk today about control systems in the renewable energy. I'm very excited about this topic, very close to my heart. I'm a big fan of how to optimize system for our clients. So I'm really excited. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And please tell us more about control systems. Tell us more about ELUM Energy. What do you do? How your product integrates with the solar and the battery and the genset. How does that all work together? And where does your product fit in?
ELUM Energy is a control and monitoring solution expert.
Yes.
We are a French company, so our HQ is based in Paris, where we have all of our software engineering team. That being said, we are present all around the world, and in Africa, we are present in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, in Lagos, in Casablanca, in Madagascar as well. We aim to actually respond to the demand of solar optimization and solar hybrid integrations. Also, I explained what was control, but I may want to also explain what is solar hybrid. So solar hybrid is just solar plus any source of power generation / power storage.
Okay.
So this means it can be PV plus genset, or PV plus genset plus battery, or just PV plus battery, or PV plus hydro. There are different ways of integrating your system, but this is essentially where ELUM intervenes on the Sub-Saharan Africa market, is when we have this kind of application and that we need a smart integration.
Okay.
If I had to give you an example, a couple of months ago, there was a massive tender. There was like 250 sites. The government had well worked on the PV side, the genset side, and the BSS side. They had even a consulting company, but they hadn't thought about the control aspect and how were they going to optimize this. And this is the role of ELUM Energy, of supplying a solution for this kind of applications, to know how are you going to maximize your PV penetration, when are you going to discharge or charge your battery, on which conditions, when are you going to switch on and off your generator. And the idea obviously is always to try to maximize the cheap electricity and use as less as possible the expensive one.
Of course.
And to tell like the story of how we actually entered the African market, and more globally actually how we entered the solar market. The story started like 8 years ago, and when we arrived at this time, each time that there was, let's take the example of the hybrid again, each time there was a hybrid project, the actors needed to reinvent the wheel because it was different equipment, different layout, different design, different grid constraint. The users needed like to configure a specific PLC, and each time they had a new project, they had to redo it all again. So our aim, our goal as manufacturers, it's to provide to the market a unique standardized solution that would actually fit all the designs, no matter the equipment, no matter the brands, no matter the logic of control, and no matter the grid code.
So are you saying that at the moment you propose a solution that is compatible, so technology agnostic, that is compatible with any type of inverter, any type of battery, any type of generator? You can integrate them, whichever the brand, whichever the makers, integrate them to optimize the solar system and the hybrid with the different technology that you mentioned, that they all integrated for the efficiency of the off-taker, of the user, the energy user.
Indeed, this is exactly
Right.
Exactly.
So I think now we've got a definition. We understand what the control system is about. Please tell us how, in which market you are at the moment, and which countries, and why did you decide to set up in those countries, in those markets specifically?
So in Africa, we actually really entered the market with PV genset application in countries that had load shedding issues.
Okay.
So
Power outages.
Power outages.
Okay.
So, for example, South Africa and Nigeria suffered about these issues. Overall, in the whole Africa, there was a massive push for electricity. The demand is growing. There was a demand also for cheap electricity. Solar made sense because we all know that PV is great, but has its limitation because it
fluctuates during the day.
Exactly.
Yes.
Then there was a necessity for hybrid, so solar plus another source of generation or storage. And this push for solar hybrid actually helped us enter the African market. And obviously the growing issues around power cuts in these Sub-Saharan countries helped us in a way enter the market and bring value and bring a solution to the customers and businesses that were penalized by these outages.
So I'd like to dive a little bit more into this topic. You mentioned the African markets. The two giants of the African markets are Nigeria and South Africa. What are the differences for you in those two different markets? What does it mean when you deploy a solution in Nigeria or when you deploy a solution in South Africa? Every grid constraint is different. What does that mean when you enter those markets? What kind of issues are you facing over there, or are you addressing over there? And here, are they the same issues? Tell us more about your experience in these two countries.
Both countries, I mean, they have in common because they are strong economies. They have industries, so important demand for electricity, and they have power outages.
Because they're number one and number two in economies in Africa.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So they need power.
This is precisely it. They also have many differences. Like, obviously, I'm only focusing on the power, the power aspect, and this is explained by the history of, let's say, the energy policies and energy trends in these countries. For example, if you look at Nigeria, historically, the main driver of the policies were, okay, we need to support activities in order to support the growth of the countries. So to do that, we need to provide a cheap electricity, cheap power. How can we do that? We are going to subsidize massively the diesel. So as such...
Because they're an oil producer, so they can afford to subsidize the diesel substantially.
Indeed.
Right.
That was one of the ways they were getting the funds to provide this. But that being said, this also had consequences that were not foreseen at the beginning. Among these consequences, there were the fact that all of these funds were not invested on the electricity grid. So no, let's say, solid national grid and production facilities. But more on an individual side, then each building can have a genset because the diesel is so cheap, and less public transport because you can have your individual car because the diesel is so cheap. But the day where the government started questioning these subsidies and actually decided to delete them, then it was a massive issue for people and for businesses.
Of course.
And from there, the necessity, from there, the push on solar, From there, the push to do an integration, PV genset during blackouts, etc., etc. In South Africa, the story is different. There was no such subsidies. However, there's all the story of load shedding that I'm not going to go into like the explanations of how did this happen. But what we know is that the market is more mature because they faced this energy crisis before. Reason why the PV market is more mature. The PV genset market also was actually started booming before the Nigerian one. But reason why as well, the BSS market is way more developed in South Africa than in Nigeria, for example. So for us, there's a difference in terms of market, even if BSS is still entering rapidly in Nigeria. There's still a difference of market and therefore a difference in terms of application and in terms of control systems we are going to provide.
Okay, so I'd like to, you mentioned the batteries, the BESS. I'd like to understand how the product that you propose and the service that you propose is integrating with the battery. How does that, so you're saying that you've got the solar, you've got the genset, you've got the grid, and you add the battery. How does your product organize the where to get the power at what time? How does that work?
So historically, let's say that players of the market didn't really look into, they were not looking beyond the fact of supplying the load when the PV is producing, and then charge the battery if there's an excess, and then use this during load shedding events. Okay, and today, actually, I think that it's essential that we challenge the status quo, because there are some grid constraints that are way more, let's say, advanced and organized than before.
Okay. What does that mean?
That means that, for example, in South Africa, which is, let's take the example of South Africa. In South Africa, there's a way of building an optimization that is enabled thanks to the organization of load shedding. To make it very clear, obviously, we know that the energy production responsibles in South Africa haven't been providing what they were asked to provide. However, we can actually point out that yes, there's load shedding and this is affecting a lot of people and this is a massive issue, obviously. That being said, the load shedding is very well organized. People know
it's scheduled.
Exactly. It's scheduled. You know when is it going to happen. You know the stages. You know how long is it going to last and what time is it going to end.
Yeah.
And this gives a tool for optimization that is way beyond the only vision of just let's charge when there's PV and then let's discharge when there's load shedding. And this is just an example, but as well, like I think that in the usage we do today, we can also look into like how to evaluate as much as possible the battery, thanks to the rules the grid is providing.
Yes, the predictability of the load shedding.
Also, for example, the tariffs that are different in South Africa between like peak hours, off-peak hours.
The time of use.
Exactly. And this is definitely a way of optimizing your integration. Another example is the penalty that the user will have to pay if they hit a certain peak on the demand.
The demand charge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is another reason why you would want to think of the usage you do of your BSS.
Right. So you're saying that you can use your battery for different applications. and be a bit more clever in the way that you use it, in the sense of at what time will you use it, up until what state of charge or state of discharge, and optimize this with the other sources of power that you've got on site. Gabriel, thanks so much for giving us so much information. I'd like to dive more into the topic of how to use the battery. What's application? How do we size a battery, and what is the benefit of your product? What I understand, what I hear in between the lines is that if you have an understanding of the philosophy that the client is trying to achieve, are we trying to cater for load shedding only? Do we want to do load shedding plus arbitrage? And please define arbitrage for us. Are we trying to do load shedding, arbitrage, and peak shaving? And how does your product help to do that? Please tell us more. It's the usage of the battery is a big topic at the moment in South Africa. It's becoming more and more democratized. More businesses are making use of batteries. What is the added value of your product when considering a battery? What do you bring to the table?
Thank you for suggesting this dive, because it's actually like the topic that's for me the most interesting and the most valuable, the most passionating, is how are we going to evaluate a battery. So as we chatted before, like for me, we must now start looking beyond the fact of just using standard applications for grid-tied projects where we charge when there's excess PV and discharge when there's load shedding. We need to be smart about it. We need to challenge the way we are currently calculating the return on investment of a battery. We can actually just come back to the list we had before and look at the different grid constraints we have and see and use them, because these are tools that we want to leverage on to maximize the return on investment of your asset.
It's quite abstract for people. I'm a business. I've got load shedding, let's say from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. I've got a battery, I've got a generator, I've got PV. What do you bring to me when I'm considering buying a battery and integrating it with my generator and my solar? What do you bring to the table, and how are you going to make the return on investment on the battery that I'm purchasing greater than if I don't use your product?
Great example. We know, so with this example, we know that we are going to have 2 hours of load shedding.
Yes.
And we know that prior to this, it was, so to say, starts at 8 a.m. There was not much sun yet. So
you would charge the battery with the grid.
Yeah, this would be for me like the main idea is the state of charge of the battery is not at its maximum. We know that we have 2 hours where we are going to have a load demand. And if we are not able of matching this load demand with the battery, then we are going to have to turn on the generator, and this is going to be expensive. So we are currently working on how can we read the ESCOM API, developing a software solution to be able to make this integration, and the EMS would be able to have this information, say, okay, the load shedding event will happen in X hours, and it will last for 2 hours. Then our EMS would be able to read this ESCOM API and make a decision in order to optimize the whole BSS functioning.
So always find the cheapest source of power at any given point, even if the load shedding stages changes. Instead of being from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning, no, it's going to be from 10 to 12. The EMS essentially captures that information and adapts. As soon as the information becomes available, it adapts its philosophy on how it's going to approach the day in terms of energy security. Is that what you're saying?
This is exactly the logic.
That is beautiful, and that's one of the solutions that is extremely valuable to our clients as ACEs, because otherwise you set in stone. You set the philosophy in stone, but you must be able to adapt to whatever the situation is, depending on whether the sun is shining, depending on how long the load shedding event is going to be, what is the cost of petrol eventually will have to also come in. So that's a huge added value that you offer to your client. When is that going to be available?
That should be available in Q3 of this year.
Okay.
And we also believe that it will be a game changer for the SA market.
We've been waiting for this for a while, not necessarily from ELUM, but from the market. So I can tell you we are extremely excited about this solution. Thank you for that. Gabriel, thank you so much for your valuable time and for you to come out this way in our studio. We look forward to a busy year and collaborating further with ELUM Energy team. Thanks so much for listening to Switched On. This was Julien Razier with ELUM Energy team. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a beautiful day. Cheers.